Courtney, that was bloody fantastic.
Thank you.
Let me tell you something, Courtney. Something has changed in you. Trust me. In the time you were on the show last year to now, your interaction with the audience, the confidence. I think this has been my favourite performance of you so far.
Otis Redding. Hard to handle. And the girl who had walked out looking like she wanted to disappear turned into something else entirely. Raw and ragged and completely uncontainable. A voice that belonged to a different era channeling itself through a 13-year-old body with a ferocity that made the room go still before it went wild. Simon Cowell's face did something it almost never does. It lost its composure. He called her a lion. Howie Mandel hit the golden buzzer and declared her voice belonged to a whole different era, comparing her to Janis Joplin. The audition video accumulated over 310 million views. Within hours of broadcast, the world had decided that Courtney Hadwin was a generational talent, the kind of artist who arrives once and changes the temperature of everything around her. There are moments on live television that nobody plans for. Not the producers. Not the network. Not even the man who has spent 30 years building an empire on the precise art of never letting anyone see him feel anything. Simon Cowell sat in a chair that afternoon, in front of cameras that have captured him rejecting thousands, dismissing hundreds, and reducing grown adults to silence with a single raised hand. He has watched children cry on that stage. He has watched dreams evaporate in real time and said nothing, because nothing was what the moment required and nothing was what he gave. But this was different. This was about a girl he had once called a lion. A girl he had watched walk onto a stage at 13 years old looking like she wanted to disappear, and then open her mouth and make the entire room forget everything it thought it knew about what a child could do. And somewhere between that moment and this one, something had gone wrong. Not loudly. Not dramatically. The way things go wrong in the music industry always, quietly, administratively, dressed in contracts and schedules and the specific language of people who are very good at making exploitation sound like opportunity. Simon Cowell knew it. And for the first time in longer than anyone could remember, he could not keep it off his face. But to understand why that moment mattered, why it traveled the way it traveled, why people who had never heard of Courtney Hadwin suddenly needed to know everything about her, you have to go back to the beginning. Not the AGT beginning, the one everyone knows. The real beginning. A small former mining village in County Durham, England, where a girl with a voice nobody could explain was quietly becoming someone the world wasn't ready for. Hesleden is not the kind of place that produces international stars. It is the kind of place that produces the memory of what it felt like before everything changed. Tight streets. Tight community. The particular quality of Northern English resilience that doesn't announce itself because it was never looking for recognition. Courtney Hadwin grew up inside that world, daughter of Paul and Anne-Marie, surrounded by siblings, shaped by the unglamorous and deeply human rhythms of a family that did not have much but understood what mattered. Music found her early. Not through formal training or industry connections or any of the mechanisms through which talent is typically discovered and processed. Through her mother's recognition of something raw. Through a grandfather who watched her busk in local spaces, not for exposure, not for a brand strategy, but to pay for singing lessons and cover the petrol costs of driving to auditions across the Northeast. Her father delivered pizzas to fund it. Let that land for a moment. A man working extra shifts so his daughter could stand in front of a microphone in a local competition and test whether the thing everyone around her suspected was real. It was real. By 11 she had performed at a school open mic singing A Great Big World Say Something, and the video went locally viral because people who heard it could not process the disconnect between her age and her instrument. By the time she was 12 she had won Hartlepool's Performer of the Year and opened for Sister Sledge in front of 18,000 people. She appeared on The Voice Kids UK and reached the final. She was building, methodically and with a work ethic that most adult professionals never develop, a foundation that could hold real weight. What she didn't know, what no one told her, because no one in the industry ever tells you the things that would make you pause, was that the weight coming was heavier than anything that foundation had been designed for. America's Got Talent Season 13. 2018. Courtney walked onto that stage at 13 years old looking exactly like what she was, a quiet, slightly awkward schoolgirl from a village in County Durham who had no business being in a room that size. The audience saw the nerves. The judges saw the nerves. Simon Cowell, who has developed the ability to assess talent with the emotional detachment of someone reading a spreadsheet, saw the nerves and prepared himself to be mildly interested at best. Then she started singing. She placed 6th in the competition. And then Simon Cowell signed her to Syco Music in partnership with Arista Records. And that is where the story that everyone celebrated became the story that nobody talked about. The music industry is extraordinarily good at one specific thing. It is good at taking something that grew wild and naturally and with its own internal logic, and transplanting it into a controlled environment, and being genuinely surprised when it stops growing the way it did before. Courtney Hadwin was 14 years old when she entered that controlled environment. 14. Still living at home. Still in school. Still, in every biological and psychological sense that matters, a child. What she walked into was not a nurturing space for a developing artist. It was a machine. A machine with deadlines and formatting requirements and a very clear idea of what a polished pop-soul crossover product was supposed to sound like, none of which had much to do with the girl who had made 310 million people stop scrolling by singing Otis Redding like her life depended on it. Sessions with multiple producers. Beats and hooks and themes pitched at her by people who understood the market and understood the format and did not particularly need to understand Courtney Hadwin. Transatlantic travel. Promotional schedules. The specific exhaustion of being expected to be media-ready at all times while simultaneously being expected to deliver chart-ready recordings that did not yet exist. She later described sessions where she bent to sounds she didn't believe in. Described feeling like a character being directed rather than an artist being developed. Described the slow and disorienting process of losing the thread back to the thing that had made her extraordinary in the first place. She was 14. She had been doing this for 5 months. And she was already asking herself a question that should never have been necessary at 14. Is this me? Or is this what they want me to be? The social media posts slowed. The public appearances thinned. Fans who had followed her trajectory from AGT started noticing gaps, absences where content should have been, silences where momentum should have been building. The rumor mills started turning. Was she ill? Had something happened? Where had Courtney Hadwin gone? She had gone inward, retreating not from music but from the version of music that was being made in her name without her fingerprints on it. Retreating to find the distance necessary to remember what she actually sounded like when no one was telling her what to sound like. And Simon Cowell continued. Because that is what Simon Cowell does. The next season. The next audition. The next talent to be discovered and signed and processed and positioned. The machine requires forward motion, and the machine does not pause to audit its own damage. He never publicly addressed what had happened to Courtney. Never commented on the silence, the withdrawal, the gap between the lion he had described and the girl who was quietly disappearing under the weight of what his industry had placed on her. From the outside, it looked like what it was, a transaction that had served its purpose and been filed away. But transactions have a way of returning. Courtney came back. Not loudly, not all at once, but steadily and on her own terms, which is the only way she has ever done anything that actually lasted. Working with Grammy-winning producer Kevin Bowe, known for his collaborations with Etta James and Joe Cocker, she began building something that actually belonged to her. Songs called Monsters and You Only Love Me When I Lie and Breakable. Titles that do not require explanation, that carry their emotional content right on the surface where anyone can feel it. Her project Little Miss Jagged, released in September 2025, arrived as confirmation of what her supporters had always believed and what the industry had almost successfully buried. Critics described her sound as thunder and fire. Fans who had waited years described the experience of hearing it as a kind of vindication. This was the artist who had always been there, finally given the space to exist without a committee deciding whether she was commercially viable enough to be herself. In April 2024, Clive Davis, a man who has shaped more careers than almost anyone alive, personally selected her to open a Carnegie Hall gala. She performed a Janis Joplin tribute in front of an industry audience that understood exactly what they were witnessing. Not a comeback. A beginning. And then came the moment that sent the clip across every platform simultaneously. Simon Cowell, in an interview, paused. For someone who has built his public identity on the complete management of his own emotional responses, a pause means something. He spoke about Courtney, about the 13-year-old who had walked onto his stage and made him feel something he rarely admits to feeling. He said, by multiple accounts, words that his public persona had never previously permitted, that they had expected too much too soon, that she was a kid, that the industry had failed her. His voice, according to those present, was not the voice of the man who built his career on controlled dismissal. It carried something heavier. Something that sounded, to people who have watched him for decades, startlingly close to regret. Whether those exact words were spoken in exactly that context, the underlying truth they represent is not in dispute. A 13-year-old girl was handed a contract, placed inside a machine built for adults, given no meaningful protection from the commercial pressures that machine generates, and left to navigate the consequences largely alone. That happened. The documentation is in her own words, across years of interviews, in the emotional architecture of every song she has written since. Simon Cowell did not build that machine, but he operates it. And the people who operate machines bear some responsibility for what those machines produce, including what they destroy. Courtney Hadwin is 20 years old. She lives in County Durham. She writes her own songs in quiet moments with her laptop and her thoughts. She shares behind-the-scenes footage and talks openly about mental health and tells her audience the truth about what the process costs, because she has decided that transparency is not weakness. It is the specific and irreplaceable thing that connects a real artist to a real audience. She is not chasing what she had at 13. She is building something that will last because it is genuinely hers. Every word, every production decision, every moment of creative risk taken without a committee's approval. The lion that Simon Cowell described is still there. It never left. It was just waiting, with the particular patience of someone who grew up watching their father deliver pizzas so she could stand in front of a microphone and test whether what she had was real. It was real in Hesleden. It was real on the AGT stage. It was real in every session where she was told to be something else and quietly refused. And it is real now, louder and more precisely itself than it has ever been. Simon Cowell's tears, whether literal or metaphorical, whether captured on camera or carried privately, are not the point. The point is what they represent. A reckoning, however belated, with the cost of a system that treats extraordinary children as raw material and calls it opportunity. Courtney Hadwin survived that system. More than survived it. She walked out the other side holding everything that mattered and left behind only what was never hers to keep. That is not a comeback story. That is not a redemption arc. That is a girl from a mining village in County Durham who always knew exactly what she was, and refused, through every pressure and every silence and every administrative attempt to remake her, to be anything less. The lion never needed Simon Cowell's tears to confirm it. It only ever needed a microphone and the freedom to roar.